Hi, this is Andy from GPS Training. In this next video I'm going to show you how you create a walking route freehand on the map page of Garmin's Basecamp planning software. I've already got the software open at the moment. I've just got it minimized at the bottom of the screen, so I'm just going to left click on my Basecamp logo just to reopen up the software. So the route I'm going to create today is a walking route, an off-road walking route using direct routing across the map page on Basecamp software. I've already got the GPS device connected to the computer as we showed you on previous videos, so I can see in the top left hand window I've got under devices my Oregon 700 GPS device connected, and then any maps that are on either my internal storage or the micro SD card are listed under here. The first thing I'm going to do is get my maps selected, the correct map that I want to use, and then get the map page to the area that I want to create my walk in. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the maps menu along the top and just make sure that it's Garmin GB Discoverer 50K, which is my Ordnance Survey 1 to 50 map selected. If you were using a different map, you would pick it from the list here for whatever map you've got loaded on your GPS device. The only maps we can't select from this maps menu is any bird's eye downloaded mapping, which we cover in later videos on bird's eye maps. So this is for any maps that are actually loaded on the internal storage of your device, likes of Topo Active or Garmin's Topo UK and Ireland mapping. So it's preloaded maps that you get with the GPS, or ones that you've downloaded from Garmin's website as a map product rather than a bird's eye voucher, and also any Ordnance Survey maps, style maps that you may have on an SD card inside your GPS device we can pick from this maps menu. So I've got Garmin GB Discoverer 50K selected. What I'm actually going to do for speed, I'm going to move the map page by using the search box to the area that I'm going to start my walk in today. So I'm going to do a walk from the village of Mungrisdale in the Lake District. So in this search box at the top, I'm simply going to type in Mungrisdale for the village that I want to move the map page to, and then I'm going to hit the magnifying glass just to bring up a search box that will show me any results for Mungrisdale. I can see straight away under the points of interest I've got a little black diamond with the wording Mungrisdale, so I'm just going to double click on that Mungrisdale, and what should happen now, the map page will move to the village of Mungrisdale. I can now close this top results box down by simply hitting the white cross in the top right hand corner of the top results box. Another way I could have moved the map, I could have used, as we showed you in previous video, we could have used the find locate coordinates and typed in a grid reference for where we wanted to start the walk from. So now I've got the map in Mungrisdale. Automatically as default on the map page, you'll find it's the hand tool that's selected, which is this pan tool, which if I left click with my mouse on the map page, I can drag the mouse around and I can see the village of Mungrisdale. And I'm just going to create a short walk that comes up from the village of Mungrisdale. It's a 1 to 50 map I'm using, so it's this pink dotted line that I'm moving the hand along. This is the public right of way that comes up here and comes back the way around the Cumbrian Way. So we're just going to go round the side of Bowscale Fell and then come back down into the village. So I'm just going to draw this freehand on the map. I've got a USB mouse which I find much easier to use when you're planning routes plugged into my computer. On my USB mouse I've got a scroll wheel on the top that lets me zoom in and zoom out. If you haven't got a USB mouse, your normal way for zooming in and zooming out would be on the actual map page of the software. If I move the cursor to the top left hand side of the screen, there's a plus and minus bar that you can left click with your cursor, and that lets you zoom in and zoom out on the map page. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the type of routing that we're going to do today to the type that we should normally use when we're using Ordnance Survey maps. Now, as default, when you first load Basecamp software for the first time now, it changes what we call the routing profile to something called normally hiking. So if I pick this little box in the toolbars that's got a picture of a man in it holding a stick and hit on the drop down option, we can see that was the hiking option. You would think that would be the one we'd want to use because we're going to do a walking route off-road, but unfortunately the product's sold worldwide and there's lots of maps that Garmin use, and in America where Garmin products come from, they normally use mapping that has topographic mapping that does have what we call routable data off-road, which means a bit like a car sat nav, you can plan a route off-road on footpaths and bridle tracks, and the map will snap that route onto the footpaths for you. So they can use this profile called hiking. But if we selected or left that as hiking when we're using the Ordnance Survey 1 to 50 map that doesn't have off-road routable data, what would actually happen is as I start to click my route on the map page, it would start to drag the route onto the closest roads, because the Ordnance Survey 1 to 50 map, the only area that it has routable data on at the moment is roads, not off-road. Some of you may be using a different type of map, like the TopoActive maps, the topographical GB and island mapping, and if any of you have bought the very latest Topo Pro 1 to 25 map from Garmin, that actually has routable data off-road, but just in the national parks, not if you're out of the national park. So most of you who are using 1 to 50 OS maps, or if you're using mapping, the new map and you're not in a national park, you will have to pick direct routing, which is the type we're going to use today, not the hiking option. So in this little box at the top where we've got the routing set as hiking as default, I've selected that and changed it and selected direct routing. What by direct routing, we're just going to draw straight lines on the map page from point to point to guide us around the footpath. We know we're not going to walk those exact straight lines, but it's a way the GPS is going to help guide us on this walk, and then when we actually finish the walk, we can save the track in the GPS device, and the next time we walk the same walk, we can actually use the track recording rather than the guided route that we've actually planned. So it is important that you do change that routing using this routing box into direct routing when you're using the Ordnance Survey maps that don't have, or any maps that don't have routable off-road data, otherwise you will find your routes will try and go on the roads rather than off-road. So the next thing I need to do, before we start planning the route on the map page, we need somewhere to save it, to keep everything nice and tidy and organized within the software. So if I move to the very top left hand window here within the software, we've got a heading called library. So this is where we're going to store everything. Hopefully that makes sense. It's the library where we're going to file everything away. We've got something called My Collection, which is where we store all of our walks, cycle rides, etc. that we plan within the software, or anything you actually take out of the GPS that you've saved, it's where you would store that. So what we normally start by doing for the very first time in the software is create some folders so that we keep everything organized and tidy. I'm a walker and a cyclist, so what I would normally do is create a folder called walking and a folder called cycling, and then within those folders you can break them down as much as you want with subfolders and even further subfolders. So within a walking folder you could then have another folder called Northumberland, Lake District, etc. A folder called Pennine Way, Coast to Coast. It's just somewhere that you can save your planned walks, cycle rides to, etc. So I'm going to create my very first folder now in this library. I've got My Collection highlighted in the top left window, and we're going to use the option File and New List Folder. So File, New List Folder, I'm creating a new folder to store stuff in, and it automatically says New Folder in the name here. I can just put the cursor with the mouse at the end of that new folder, hit the backspace on the keyboard and give it a new name. So I'm going to call it Walking, and just hit the return button. If you accidentally don't rename it and it's just left as new folder, you can right click with your mouse and you do get the option to rename if you don't put the name in correctly. So I've now got a folder called Walking. I'm going to create a subfolder in there, so as long as I've got Walking highlighted, I'm going to select File again and New List Folder again, and I'm going to call this one Lake District. So any walks I do in the Lake District are going to get saved in this folder. Hopefully you're getting a feel of what we're doing with the folders. I could then highlight the walking folder again and create a second folder called Northumberland, long distance walks, etc. So however you would like to keep your walks nice and neat and tidy within the software. So I'm just going to hit the return button. I've now got a folder called Lake District. The final thing we need to do, so the folders are where we store everything, we need to create what we call a list file, which I would view as an electronic sheet of paper that you're going to draw the route onto. Now the nice thing is every new list file you create with a new walk or cycle ride gives you a nice clean map, so you're not seeing lots of routes and tracks on the same map page and it looks cluttered. If you create a new list file for every new walk or cycle ride, it keeps the map page nice and tidy and clean. We look at this new list file as an electronic sheet of paper that you're drawing the route onto. So under the folder Lake District now, I'm going to create my list file for Bow Scale Fell. So I'm going to go File, New, and this time rather than picking a folder, I'm picking this option for an electronic sheet of paper called a list. Select list, and we now get the new list box appear. Same as before with the folders, I can just left click with the cursor at the end of the new list wording and just type in here. Then this is where you would put the actual name of the walk or cycle ride that you're doing. So I'm going to call this one Bow Scale Fell. Just type that in and hit the return. Again, if you accidentally type something in incorrectly, you can right click the same as we could on the folder, right click with the mouse and you get the option of rename. You do get the option of remove if you make a mistake and just want to delete it completely. So I've now got a list file called Bow Scale Fell. So what's important now, when I plan this route, I've got to make sure, especially when you start having lots of folders and lots of list files within the My Collection and library, make sure you've got the right one highlighted before you actually start the planning, because that's where it's going to be saved within this My Collection. So I'm ready to do my Bow Scale Fell route. I've got the list file highlighted, and the tool that we're going to use is one called the New Route tool. So I'm just going to have one last double check. I've got my routing activity profile selected as direct routing, just to draw straight lines between points on the map page, and I'm going to select this tool that looks like 3 square boxes joined together, and when I move the cursor on it, it actually tells me that's the New Route tool. Any of you who have not got these tools along the top, this should be there as default when you first start up the software. You can actually go to the tools menu along the top and you will see there you've got the route tool, these 3 green boxes linked together. So I can select it that way as well. So as soon as I select the route tool, I now get a box appear on the screen for the first time saying new route, drag start point here. We don't use this type of route planning in GB. It tends to be for the sort of mapping that you're using for a long distance cycle ride, motorbike trail, where you do have routable maps, so you would end up marking a start and an end and let the map actually decide where you're going to go. It's not the type of routing that we tend to use for our off-road walking routing in the UK. So what I'd recommend you do when that box appears, there's a little white box at the bottom that says don't show this window again. If you click in this don't show this window again and simply close the box down, that should stop that box appearing, and we're now ready just to plan the route in the way that we normally would in this country for our ordnance survey mapping and the type of routing that we tend to do for walking. So I've now got this little pencil symbol on the screen. So bear in mind, I can't move the map around now using the hand tool. What would happen is I would end up marking points on the map where I probably don't want to point. So if you did think that you still had the hand tool selected and I was to left click somewhere with the mouse, what would happen is I would start marking what we call shaping points on the actual map page. So if you've made a mistake and didn't mean to do that and you weren't at the start of your route, a nice thing you can do is simply use this edit at the top. Edit, undo, edit, undo, and it takes you back 2 steps. So now I'm back to where we were. If I want to move the map around, the way I can do it is move the pencil tool to the very top left hand corner of the map page, and where we've got this compass bezel, I can use the left, right, up and down arrows. Also I've got the zoom in and zoom out bar there, or I can use the zoom in and zoom out bar on my USB mouse that I'm using. So I'm going to start this walk in the village of Mungrisdale and just follow this pink dotted line, which is the public right of way, past Bow Scale Fell and back down the Cumbrian Way, and then back down this bridle track to the village of Mooresdale. I've got this overview map displayed at the top of the screen. If that's in the way, you can actually just close that down with the white cross in the corner of the overview map. So I'm now going to click my very first point in the bottom right of the map page next to the phone box in Mungrisdale, and as soon as I click my first point, what you'll see in this bottom left hand window under the heading Bow Scale Fell, which is the list file I've got highlighted, we see the route starting to appear in this bottom left hand window. Where I've got this box up here telling me that I've marked a point in the national park, I can just hit the cross to the side of there just to get that out of the way. And what you're trying to do is just click a point every time the footpath changes direction, just to make sure you're heading in the right direction. So I'm just going to mark this down the footpath here, and hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. Just marking it every time there's a slight change in direction. A direct route can be made up of a maximum of 250 points to work in a Garmin GPS. So most routes that you do in a day's walking route, you shouldn't get anywhere near 250 points. Obviously, if you're doing a long distance walk over a number of days, the total could be more than 250 points, but I would recommend you split the route into days when you're planning it. So again, I'm just marking this route down the route I can see on the map page. Normally you would have something with you that you're using to maybe plan this walk, from a guidebook, a magazine article, to hopefully you're just getting the idea that I'm just marking the points as it changes direction. In a further video after this video, we're going to show you some editing and how you can amend the route. I'm not going to show that in this initial video. That's something we show at a later video, how you can actually amend the route if you've made mistakes and want to change any of these points that you've marked. So I'm just coming back down the road here, and what we'd always recommend, you don't ever close a route and join it together at the end. I'd always leave a small gap between start and finish, that when you start the route, the GPS doesn't get confused and think that you've already ended the route. Different when you've actually got a track recording in your GPS that normally starts and ends at the same point, that's fine, but normally when we plan a route this way, we don't join it at the end. And the tip is, when you actually finish the route, before you start doing any editing or amending, that you select the hand tool to stop you accidentally marking a point where you don't want one. If you accidentally do again mark a point somewhere at the end where you're meant to move the map, you can simply use the edit and undo, and it'll take you back one step. One other thing when you're planning a route, if you get to the edge of a map page and need to go further, what's nice on the Windows version of the software, I know I showed you how you can use the compass bezel to move the map, but actually when you get to the edge of a map page, you get this white arrow up here. So if I go to the bottom of the map page, move the cursor to the top of the map page, whenever you see that big white arrow appear, when you left click with your mouse, you won't actually mark a point, it will actually move the map for you that way as well. So that's quite useful if you are doing a large route and you get the end of the map page, rather than going to the top left and using the arrows in the compass bezel, you can just left click when you see that white arrow to move the map. So when you've finished your route, we recommend you go to the hand tool, and then we're ready for the actual editing and amending a route. So that's just a very simple route drawn out freehand on the map page, and in some further videos we're going to show you how you rename this route and actually edit the points and move the route around. So I hope you found this short video useful, and thanks for watching.